We are entrusting the day and the endeavor to the Lord. Let's go. Welcome to my channel where I visit many good books but live in the Bible. My name is Sarah Christine, and today we are going to talk about none other than Stephen King's Pet Sematary. I picked this up because a booktuber named Murphy Napier said that Pet Sematary helped her process grief more than any nonfiction or even devotional book did, and I was intrigued. This was my first King and my first horror, and to tell you how much of a green bean I was going into this, I thought the story would have a happy ending. It does not. But I'm going to give a brief overview. This story follows one Lewis Creed when he moves with his wife and two young children to a rural town in Maine to take up a job as a physician at a local university. And initially, everything is great. The house is huge, they have a vast property, and they have a really warm and welcoming neighbor whose name is Judd Crandall, who will become something like a surrogate father and really close friend to Lewis as the book progresses. And Judd initially even takes pains to give them the lay of the land, show them their own property, and point out this little area of wood that is the Pet Sematary, where generations of local kids, Judd included, have buried beloved pets. He takes the opportunity to let Lewis know, hey, you better keep an eye on your daughter's cat, this cat, because the road that their houses are on, or the road, as Judd would say, is high traffic, lots of big trucks, and has, quote, used up a lot of pets in its time. That turns out to be a very prescient warning, and spoilers ahead. The cat does get hit by a truck, but at the time, Lewis is alone. His wife and their two kids are off visiting their grandparents. But Lewis just thinks to himself, oh my gosh, Ellie loves this cat. What am I gonna do? I can't tell her it died. It's gonna freak her out. Because earlier in the book, it's clear that Ellie is distraught over the thought of Church dying, and he dead. But as Lewis is freaking out, enter Judd, who tells him that past the Pet Sematary, there is another burial ground, a Micmac Indian burial ground, and the things that are buried there don't stay in the ground. This brings me to my first takeaway from Pet Sematary, which is that there are some things it don't pay to be curious about, because Judd and Lewis do bury Church the cat in that Micmac burial ground. And in the aftermath, before Church makes his reappearance, Judd and Lewis discuss what they did, and Judd admits, that place, all at once it gets hold of you, and you make up the sweetest smelling reasons in the world. But I could have been wrong, Lewis. That's all I'm saying. Lester could have been wrong. Stanley B. could have been wrong. Hell, I ain't God either. But bringing the dead back to life, that's about as close to playing God as you can get, ain't it? Lewis opened his mouth again, then closed it again. What would have come out would have sounded wrong and cruel. Judd, I didn't go through all that just to kill the damn cat again. Judd drained his beer, then put it carefully aside with the other empties. I guess that's it, he said. I'm all talked out. Can I ask you one other question? Lewis asked. I guess so, Judd said. Lewis said, has anyone ever buried a person up there? Judd's arm jerked convulsively. Two of the beer bottles fell off the table and one of them shattered. Christ on his throne, he said to Lewis. No, and whoever would. You don't even want to talk about such things, Lewis. I was just curious, Lewis said uneasily. Some things it don't pay to be curious about, Judd Crandall said, and for the first time he looked really old and infirm to Lewis Creed, as if he were standing somewhere in the neighborhood of his own freshly prepared grave. And later, at home, something else occurred to Lewis about how Judd had looked at that moment. He had looked like he was lying. When I read that, I was like, Judd is either fully possessed or he is being heavily influenced by the devil, because we know the devil is a liar per John 8:44, when Jesus says, you are of your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth, and there is no truth in him. When he tells a lie, he speaks from his own nature, because he is a liar and the father of lies. And so when Judd Crandall be out here lying about something like that, I'm like, the devil got him. The thing is, the way Judd lies in this book is very devilish. It is alluring and assuring, where he's telling Lewis, There's power in this place. We can raise that cat up from the grave. And assuring, like, I did it with my dog Spot. And I mean, you love your daughter and she loves this cat. So follow your heart, which is itself a lie from the pit of hell. Frankly, the interaction between Judd and Lewis reminded me of a poem by William Baer called The Snake, which gives voice to Satan in the garden when he's talking to Eve. And the poem goes like this. Yes, you have a lovely garden here, full of flowers, fields, and fruits, lakes and streams, beneath a tree of life, in a paradise of pleasure, in a place of dreams. And yes, you have each other's trust and love, naked as if one flesh, chaste and free. And yes, you have dominion over and above everything as far as the eye can see. And yet, you lack a certain acuity, a comprehension of all that lies within, of good and evil, of ambiguity, of death, and the leprosy of sin. Become as gods then, transform into something new. Put hiss in your voice and fork your tongue in two. I don't know about you, but I think that is very standard devil, where he's affirming. He's saying, oh yeah, lovely garden, naked as if one flesh, dominion over everything. But let me tell you about something that I think you'll find intriguing. I mean, don't you want to comprehend all that lies within? Don't you want to know about evil, about death, about the leprosy of sin? And you may be sitting there thinking, no, I don't want to know about any of those things. Good for you. I'm going to be honest with you. I have been running with the Lord since February 6, 2019, and I still fell for the devil. I still fell for his scheme. Not even 2 months ago, when I was in West Virginia and I went to this pop-up secondhand bookstore and I was just browsing and I came across this book that was about a period of historical atrocities. And the cover is what initially stuck out to me because it was this very arresting, scary image of presumably one of the torturers from this time period. And I was intrigued. And when I read the back of the book and what it was talking about, I was like, sounds interesting. And when I went up to the bookseller, he said, oh yeah, that book will stick with you. Sir, you don't even know. Oh, there it went. Pet Sematary, that is. The other book is gone. Back to hell. So I bought the book, came home, popped it on my shelves, kind of forgot about it. Fast forward until about a couple weeks ago when I was organizing to start BookTube and I came across the book again. And it kind of gave me a weird feeling. I thought, maybe it has bookworms. And I'd read somewhere that the way you deal with that is you put it in a plastic sack and you put it in your freezer. And now, just think about this logically. The book had been on my shelf for a month. If there had been bookworms, they would have already proliferated. But the book gave me a weird feeling and I attributed it to that. And so packed up the book, stuck it in the freezer. Fast forward to last week. I'm going through the freezer and, oh, right, there's that book. So I pulled it out and was taking it back to my room. And when I got to the threshold of my bedroom, something told me, don't bring that in there. And I literally dropped the book in its plastic bag on the threshold of my bedroom. And for the rest of the day, I was just walking over it back and forth, back and forth. Well, come nighttime, I am zonked after my first week of intensive Hebrew, in bed, ready to just conk out. And I hear this rhythmic thudding sound. Like, what the heck is that? Did I leave my laundry in? And I sit up and I realize it's coming from right outside my bedroom door. This da-dun, da-dun, da-dun. It's like a heartbeat. And then suddenly I see that image, that cover image of that torturer coming through my bedroom door. And I was like, Romans 16:20, devil, get beneath my feet, be crusheth below. And I stuck my eye mask on and I went, go to bed, go to bed, go to bed, go to bed. And it was working. I was like, I'm going to sleep. And then I feel this presence standing over me. And I was like, and then something touched my ear. And I was out of that bed, eye mask on. I was like, I ain't the one. And so I went out to my bedroom. I grabbed the book by its plastic baggie and I threw it into the garage, locked door, bolted, went back to bed and I was like, Jesus. And went to sleep. next morning, told my parents, I was like, we got to get rid of that thing. And they were going out, they were going far into town. And they said, okay, we'll toss it. They toss it. And that night, everything was fine. We kind of had a laugh about it, like, oh, ha, 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 ha. Yeah. Next night, getting ready for bed, in bed, going to sleep. And suddenly I hear that sound again. That heartbeat, that thud, thud, thud. And I sit up. And I see that freaking apparition again. And I was like, Jesus, I thought we handled this. What the what? And I prayed, I was praying, and it wasn't going away. And then I closed my eyes, and every time I closed my eyes, every face that I would see, my face, my parents' face, the faces of characters from books that I was trying to like think into, they were becoming these grotesque, devilish faces, like, ugh. And I stayed up until 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, just praying and help. And the next day, I was texting everybody. I was texting my Indonesian friends, my Indian friends, my Puerto Rican friends, my friends that had served as missionaries in West Africa and so had seen a lot of stuff, and saying, I thought I handled this. What's going on? I got rid of the book. And it wasn't until my mom and I went through every room in our house and the freezer, for good measure, with prayer and holy water, that feeling of darkness, that boom, 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 lifted. So, some things it don't pay to be curious about. And the thing that really gets me is I paid money. I paid someone money so that I could bring a demonic curse, or I don't even know what the heck, book into my house. Girl. Because I was intrigued about evil, about death, about the leprosy of sin. And I thought I could handle it because I've read about Unit 731. I've read about Joseph Mengele. Heck, I met Eva Kor. Yeah, there's a quote in Pet Sematary where it says, sometimes stupidity masquerades as kindness, and sometimes stupidity masquerades as pride. I was an idiot. So yes, some things it don't pay to be curious about. Think of the cat. Curiosity killed the cat. And I really wish Louis Creed would have appreciated that, because not too long after Church is killed and brought back, Louis's 2-year-old son Gage gets hit by a truck on that road because while Louis was running after him, he was just too slow. And that brings me to the second takeaway I had from this book, which is that the hand of man is too short to save. Page 232, this is after Gage has been killed and Louis is sitting at his kitchen table in a kind of disassociative state, remembering what had happened. In Louis's mind, he saw Gage running across the lawn towards the road. They were yelling at Gage to come back, but he wouldn't. Lately, the game had been to run away from Mommy and Daddy, and then they were chasing him, Louis quickly outdistancing Rachel, but Gage had a big lead. Gage was laughing. Gage was running away from Daddy. That was the game, and Louis was closing the distance, but too slowly. Gage was running down the mild slope of the lawn, now to the verge of Route 15. Louis prayed to God that Gage would fall down. Fall down. Yes, fall down. Bloody his nose, crack his skull, need stitches, whatever, because now he could hear the drone of a truck coming towards them, one of those big 10-wheelers that went back and forth endlessly between Bangor and the Arinco plant in Bucksport. And he had screamed Gage's name then, and he believed that Gage had heard him and tried to stop. Gage seemed to realize that the game was over, that your parents don't scream at you when it was just a game. And he tried to put on the brakes, and by then the sound of the truck was very loud. The sound of it filled the world. It was thundering. Louis had thrown himself forward in a flying tackle, and he believed that the tips of his fingers had actually brushed the back of the light jacket Gage had been wearing, and then Gage's forward motion had carried him out into the road, and the truck had been thunder. The truck had been sunlight on high chrome. The truck had been the deep-throated, shrieking bellow of an air horn, and that had been Saturday, and that had been 3 days ago. I actually have an anecdote that relates to this. When I was the same age as Gage, like 2 years old, my dad came home from a work trip, and I was so excited to see him that I ran on my little legs and did not notice that there was a toy in my path. And my dad, though he saw the toy, he couldn't reach it before I got there, and I tripped. And I smacked my head on our piano bench and cracked my head open. The need stitches, that was me. And I'll insert a picture where you can see the scar. I still have it. But I don't know if that's a universal parental experience, but I think it's very common to be reaching out a hand to your kid to protect them and not being able to do it. And as I was thinking about that, I thought of Isaiah 59:1, where it says that God's hand is not shortened, that he cannot save. And I was like, oh, well, that's right. My Heavenly Father is never in a position where he cannot protect me. And then I had to pause a moment because I realized, well, I have not been hit by a truck, but I have been hit by some stuff. And I know that God loves me, and I know that he has the ability to reach me and to protect me from any and all circumstances. So why didn't he do that? And as I was thinking about that, what came into my head was John 3:16, that very famous Tim Tebow verse where it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." And I was just like, wow, God, not only did you not spare your Son, you gave him up for us. And then I was just thinking about Jesus and how he wasn't a limp noodle in that. He was an active participant. John 10:17-18 says, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down and the authority to take it back up again. This command I have received from my Father." And as I was thinking about that, what came into my mind was none other than Harry Potter. And particularly an interaction that Harry and Dumbledore have in The Half-Blood Prince when they're talking about the prophecy and Harry is saying, well, I have to do this. I have to do it because the prophecy says. And Dumbledore is arguing with him like, no, that's not what this is. And just imagine you never heard the prophecy. Dumbledore tells him, how would you feel about Voldemort now? Think. Harry watched Dumbledore striding up and down in front of him and thought. He thought of his mother, his father, and Sirius. He thought of Cedric Diggory. He thought of all the terrible deeds he knew Lord Voldemort had done. A flame seemed to leap inside his chest, searing his throat. "I'd want him finished," said Harry quietly, "and I'd want to do it." "Of course you would," cried Dumbledore. "You see, the prophecy does not mean you have to do anything, but Voldemort continues to set store by the prophecy. He will continue to hunt you, which makes it certain, really, that one of us is going to end up killing the other," said Harry. Yes, but he understood at last what Dumbledore had been trying to tell him. It was, he thought, the difference between being dragged into the arena to face a battle to the death and walking into the arena with your head held high. Some people, perhaps, would say that there was little to choose between the two, but Dumbledore knew, and so do I, thought Harry with a rush of fierce pride, and so did my parents, that there was all the difference in the world. And when Harry eventually faces down death with his head held high, he's doing it to save other people's lives. And that is exactly the model of Christ. No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. My hands are pierced, not short. In Jesus, there's no one the Father's hands can't reach. That's not the case in Pet Sematary. In Pet Sematary, Louis Creed's hands are too short to save. And the only thing left for him to do is to dig graves. This brings me to my third takeaway. When you find out you're in a hole, stop digging. Page 254, Louis is thinking to himself about that Micmac burial ground and about how, well, it worked for church and maybe it'll work for Gage too. The idea had a deadly attraction. It made a balance of logic which was impossible to deny. Church had been killed in the road. Gage had been killed in the road. Here was church. Changed, of course, distasteful in some ways, but here. Ellie, Gage, and Rachel all had a working relationship with him. He killed birds, true, and had turned a few mice inside out, but killing small animals was a cat thing to do. Church had by no means turned into Frankencat. He was, in many ways, as good as ever. "You're rationalizing," a voice whispered. "He's not as good as ever. He's spooky. The crow, Louis. Remember the crow?" "Good God," Louis said aloud in a shaky, distracted voice he was barely able to recognize as his own. Louis killed his beer and went back for another. If Gage came back changed in such a way, that would be an obscenity. But in spite of everything, the idea had that deadly attraction, that sick luster, that glamour. Yes, that above all else, it had glamour. That attraction, that glamour eventually wins out, and Lewis digs up Gage's body and takes it to that Micmac burial ground. Page 366. Lewis kneeled and set Gage's body on the ground with a groan of relief. At last his consciousness began to come back. He used the pocket knife to cut the tape holding the pick and shovel slung over his back. They fell to the ground with a clink. Lewis rolled over and lay down for a moment, spread eagle staring blankly at the stars. What was that thing in the woods, Lewis? Lewis, do you really think anything good can come at the climax of a play where something like that is among the cast of characters? But now it was too late to back out, and he knew it. Besides, he gibbered to himself, it may still come out all right. There is no gain without risk, perhaps no risk without love. There's still my bag, not the one downstairs, but the one in our bathroom on the high shelf. There are syringes, and if something happens, something bad, no one has to know but me. His thoughts dissolved into the inarticulate, droning mutter of prayer, even as his hands groped for the pick, and still on his knees, Lewis began to dig into the earth. Each time he brought the pick down, he collapsed over the end of it like an old Roman falling on his sword. Yet little by little, the hole took shape and deepened. He clawed the rocks out. Most he simply pushed aside along with the growing pile of stony dirt, but some of them he saved for the cairn. As I was reading that scene, and frankly, 50 pages before that scene, when the idea of taking Gage to that Micmac burial ground is percolating in Lewis's mind, I just kept thinking of Proverbs 22:3, where it says, "A wise person sees danger and takes cover. Fools keep going and are punished." And Psalm 14:1 says that a fool says in his heart, there is no God. And by that definition, Lewis Creed is a fool. He does not have any relationship with the Lord. And because of that, I think he cannot stop digging. He is compelled by worldly grief. 2 Corinthians 7:10 says that there is a godly grief that leads to repentance without regret, and a worldly grief that leads to death. Lewis Creed's grief in Pet Sematary is a worldly grief. It is a godless grief. It is a hopeless grief. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 says, "We don't grieve as those who have no hope." Lewis Creed has no hope in this book. He believes that Gage is gone, that he's never going to see his son again unless he does something about it. In the aftermath, when Gage has come back with predictable consequences, Lewis reproaches himself and he asks, "How could I have been so stupid?" Lewis said to the empty room, talking to himself again, not caring. How? Grief, not stupidity, Lewis. There is a difference, small but vital. The battery that burying ground survives on, growing in power, Judd said. And of course he was right, and you're part of its power now. It has fed on your grief, no more than that. It's doubled it, cubed it, raised it to the nth power. It's cost you your wife, and it's almost surely cost you your best friend, as well as your son. This is it. What comes when you're too slow wishing away the thing that knocks on your door in the middle of the night is simple enough. Total darkness. In John 13:27, we are told that Satan entered Judas. In Pet Sematary, the Wendigo, this evil spirit, enters Lewis Creed, and it eviscerates his family. Now, in fairness to Lewis, he did not know when he moved them that they were going to be living on the highway or the road to hell. But Lewis did dig that hole himself. And I really wish that Lewis had stopped digging when he realized the hole that he was in, when he realized the total darkness that was overcoming him. And I really wish that he had turned to Jesus, because even if he was in like the Marianas Trench depth of pit, Psalm 40:2-3 says that God took me up from a desolate pit, a miry bog, and set my feet upon the rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to God, and many will see and fear, and they will trust in the Lord. Could have had a happy ending if only he knew the Lord. So, in reading Stephen King, I was reminded of how grateful I am to know the King of Kings. And if you, like me, have ever found yourself being intrigued by things it don't pay to be curious about, or relying on the hands of man which are too short to save, or digging yourself a hole, or frankly, even your own grave, I pray that you would turn to the one whose name is above every name, whose hand is not too short to save, and who can take you up from a desolate pit, a miry bog, and set your feet upon a rock and make your steps secure. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope that this was edifying, encouraging, and entertaining, and I hope that you will continue to join me as I visit many good books, but live in the Bible. I gotta do the accent. Has my bra strap been there the whole time? Do you see this giraffe shirt? Ah! Honestly, they got red eyes. That's kind of scary. But it fits the vibe.